Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be taking a deep dive into the seriously fascinating world of biotechnology regulation. Specifically, we are looking at exactly how life-saving biological products actually make it to market legally, safely, and successfully. So if you've ever wondered about all that monumental behind-the-scenes effort that happens before a cutting-edge medical treatment ever reaches a patient, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's just jump right in.
So picture this. You're a young professional, right? Maybe you're launching a new career at a biotech startup, or you just landed a big compliance role. You literally have a groundbreaking new therapy sitting right there in the lab. It's something that could save thousands of lives. But then you hit a massive roadblock. How do you legally bring that life-saving biologic to the market? You obviously can't just box it up and ship it off to your local pharmacy. You actually have to navigate this intensely rigorous, high-stakes gauntlet of requirements just to prove your medical breakthrough is safe for the public. It sounds super intimidating, I know, but honestly, once you understand the framework, it really does make perfect sense.
To get us there, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with Biologics licensing explained, then move on to earning FDA approval, updating your products safely, fast tracks and special rules, and finally, the costs of non-compliance.
All right, Part 1, Biologics licensing explained. The driver's license for biotech.
Think about getting your driver's license for a second. Before you can legally take a car out on the open road, the government makes you prove you know how to drive without endangering yourself or anyone else, right? Well, the regulatory framework for medical products works on that exact same logic. You absolutely have to prove you're safe before you hit the market. So what is a biologic anyway? Let's drop the dense legal jargon for a minute. A biologic is not just some simple chemical pill you can easily copy in a basic lab. It's a highly complex medical product. They're often derived from living organisms, and they're used to diagnose, monitor, or treat diseases in humans. Because they are so incredibly complex and sensitive, they need strict regulatory oversight. The government basically needs absolute certainty that the public is safe from things like contamination or inconsistent manufacturing.
To actually get that biotech driver's license, a manufacturer has to build their application on 3 totally non-negotiable pillars. First up, you have to demonstrate safety, meaning the product won't cause unacceptable harm. Second, you have to ensure purity, meaning it is completely free from any outside contamination or dangerous unintended elements. And third, you have to guarantee potency, meaning the product literally does what you claim it does at the exact strength you claim it has. If you miss even one of these 3 pillars, yeah, your product isn't going anywhere.
Moving on to Part 2, earning FDA approval, proving you belong on the market.
Okay, so you know the basic standards, but how do you actually convince the regulators that your company deserves this license? Well, earning approval takes a monumental amount of evidence across 3 core steps. First, you've got to hand over massive stacks of paperwork with all your clinical and non-clinical data. You essentially have to show them exactly how the product performed during testing. Next, you have to detail every single aspect of your manufacturing methods and prove your product stays stable over time. But step 3, this is where a lot of people actually get tripped up. You have to pass rigorous facility inspections. See, regulators don't just care about the liquid inside the vial, they care deeply about the physical building where it's made. If your manufacturing plant isn't following gold standard practices, your application gets denied, plain and simple.
All right, Part 3, updating your product safely, navigating post-market changes.
Let's say you pass with flying colors. Awesome, you're on the market. Are you done dealing with regulators? Not even close. In the real world of science and business, things are constantly changing. Maybe you buy brand new equipment, or you figure out a better way to filter your product. Navigating how to legally handle those tweaks is a huge part of a compliance professional's job. Basically, changes are strictly categorized by risk. If you make a major change, like, say, completely changing how you inactivate viruses during production, that carries a really high risk to patients. So you are legally required to get formal approval before you distribute even a single drop of that new product. On the flip side, you've got minor changes. These have minimal risk of messing with the product's quality. For example, extending an expiration date using a testing protocol that the agency already approved. For that kind of thing, you can literally just log it in an annual report. No need to wait around for a green light.
But wait, what about the gray area? What if a change isn't totally massive, but it's definitely not trivial either? Well, that's where this specific number becomes incredibly important, 30. If a company makes a moderate change, meaning it has a moderate potential to impact the product, they have to submit all their validation paperwork to the regulators, and then they wait a strict minimum of 30 days. If those 30 days tick by and the authorities haven't hit the brakes, the company is legally allowed to start distributing the updated product. It's actually a pretty clever way to keep business moving while still keeping a really tight safety net in place.
Which brings us to Part 4,
fast tracks, and special rules, exceptions for urgent needs.
Everything we've covered so far takes a long time, but obviously, sometimes society just does not have time. What happens when we're up against a severe, life-threatening illness, and the standard bureaucratic timeline would literally cost lives? In those desperate situations, regulators use something called accelerated approval. Instead of waiting years to definitively prove that a drug extends a patient's lifespan, a company can get early market access by proving their product hits a specific early indicator of success. We sometimes call this a surrogate endpoint. So maybe the drug shrinks a tumor really quickly. The agency will grant approval based on that early win, but, and this is a major catch, the company has to make a legally binding promise to keep studying the drug after it's on the market to verify those long-term benefits. If those follow-up studies fail, the product can be pulled right off the shelves.
And that elegantly leads us to an even more extreme exception, which is often called the animal rule. Imagine a completely lethal threat, like a highly toxic chemical or even nuclear radiation. It would be 100% unethical to deliberately expose healthy humans to something that lethal just to see if your antidote works, right? You just can't run human trials for that. So here's how it works. Step 1. The lethal threat is identified. Step 2. The company tests their countermeasure on animal models that closely mirror human biology. And let's say it shows really strong success. Step 3. The regulators can then grant a highly restricted approval based purely on that animal data, simply because it is the absolute safest, most ethical path forward in a massive emergency.
There are also some really specific rules when it comes to children. Kids aren't just miniature adults, you know? Their bodies actually process medicines very differently. Because of that, companies are generally required to prove their products are safe and effective specifically for pediatric populations. But regulators are also practical. If a disease acts the exact same way in both adults and kids, a company can sometimes just extrapolate the adult data to save time. And if a disease simply doesn't affect children at all, like certain types of age-related arthritis, for example, the company can get a total waiver from those pediatric requirements.
And finally, Part 5, the cost of noncompliance. Losing your license.
All right, so we've navigated the whole journey. We applied for the license, we managed the special exceptions. But what happens if a company decides to play fast and loose with the rules? From a business standpoint, this is where things get incredibly serious. We're actually back to the number 30 again, but this time it's a hard deadline. If a company ever decides to pull an approved biological product from commercial distribution, maybe it's just a business decision, or maybe they found a defect, they cannot just quietly sweep it under the rug. No way. They have exactly 30 working days to formally notify the authorities that the product is coming off the market. Absolute transparency is a strict legal mandate here.
Because if you aren't transparent, or if your safety standards start slipping, the authorities have an unbelievable amount of enforcement power. The government can step in and either suspend or completely revoke a biologics license at any time if they feel public health is being threatened. Going back to our driver's license analogy from earlier, having that license is a privilege, right? It's not an absolute right. If you start driving recklessly through a crowded neighborhood, the state is going to take your license away. That exact same principle applies to biotech manufacturing.
So what actually triggers that kind of catastrophic business event? Well, here is a clear rundown of the major compliance failures that will absolutely get a license revoked. First, refusing to let inspectors into your facility. You literally cannot lock the doors on the government. Second, and this is pretty obvious, manufacturing products that are unsafe or ineffective. Third, making major changes to your facility or your manufacturing process without telling anyone. And fourth, secretly stopping production just to hide massive systemic issues. If a compliance professional lets any of these things happen, their product, and very likely their entire company, is completely finished.
Wow, okay, we've covered a huge amount of ground in this explainer today, from the insanely strict rules and massive data requirements, all the way to the severe penalties for manufacturers. It can definitely feel like a whole lot of heavy bureaucracy at first glance, but I want to leave you with this final thought to really ponder. How do these rigorous compliance standards ultimately protect your own health as a consumer? Because every single time you or a loved one relies on a modern medical treatment, these exact rules are functioning as an invisible shield, making sure whatever goes into your body is safe, pure, and potent. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you on the next one.
If you found this helpful or want to stay updated when this regulation changes, subscribe and support the channel. And if you need the full technical details on this CFR, click the link in the description below. See you next time.